Good afternoon, Ossining. It is Mayor Victoria Gearity coming to you just a couple of minutes before 4 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. I think we're getting in here under the wire before sundown when so many of our neighbors are going to be celebrating Passover. So I just want to take a moment to hi, Isabel. You're so good at tuning in right away. I think you were one of the first people on yesterday, if I'm remembering correctly. So thank you for those folks who are tuning in right away as soon as you got the prompt that this was happening. Can I ask you to take a moment if you find these updates to be valuable, or you have a question you want to ask, or you know someone who wants to be kept informed on what's happening, particularly on the COVID front and what's going on in our community, then please share this. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go to my mayor's page where this is happening, and I'm going to share the Facebook Live event that's going on right now onto my personal page. That's one way that I can reach a few more people. It's not always the same people that follow me as mayor as follow me as a friend. Here we go. Tune in. Alrighty. And one other person I was going to just alert to that this was happening. I'm live now. Please share. Okay. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you for being so engaged and for participating and for doing your best to maintain a positive attitude. That's a tough thing to do these days, but it's made a little easier by so much effort by so many people. Obviously, the people who are on the front line, keeping us safe and keeping us fed, and looking out for our neighbors, but also just ordinary people who we're trapped in our homes for the most part, most of us, and folks who are essential workers, when they're not at work, they're at home with their families too, not going out and enjoying ourselves the way we normally do. But it's been pretty remarkable to see how many people have stepped up to try and find ways that they can help. And one of the easiest ways, if you have any dollars that you can spare, is to donate money to some of the terrific local organizations that are helping keep everyone safe and fed and cared for right now. And so I'm going to list a few that I'm particularly aware of, but I'm going to encourage you, if there is a local organization that you think people should be contributing to, you see that they're doing great work, and you want to make sure that they're able to continue serving our community, then please go ahead and add that link to this thread. And maybe this is a good opportunity to make people aware of some of the great things that are happening. So one of the really fun ones that is so enchanting is Max's Arcade. Max is a young man in Ossining who has been selling t-shirts for his arcade, and you may be one of the many families that has been to his arcade, which is a bunch of games made out of recycled material, and he's very, very creative, and he does these as fundraisers for local organizations. And this year he's focused his efforts right now on Feeding Westchester, who has been so instrumental in so much of our food distribution. So that's one of the fun ones. Then obviously Feeding Westchester directly, an Open Door, which is just such a tremendous asset for our community health center. Galata House has been very helpful in food distributing meals. Neighbors Link has been doing tremendous work in reaching out to our Spanish-speaking community, which sometimes we don't do as good a job at connecting with, and that's something that we're always continuing to work on, and grateful for partners in Neighbors Link. And there was also a really fun post. I saw one of the Girl Scout troops donating cookies to the Ossining Police Department because our officers are still on duty every day. We are so fortunate to have them on duty. And still finding a way to get out there and keep us all safe. They're suited up to protect themselves. It is a very stressful environment. There's potential risk every time our frontline folks in healthcare, our first responders and even our food service workers now are really putting themselves at risk, and we need them to, and we're really grateful for that. There is some interesting news today that's kind of exciting for democracy. New York State, the Governor Cuomo has just announced by by an executive order that all voters will be able to vote by absentee ballot in the June primary election. So in the past, there's always been an application for absentee ballots. In fact, I've helped many folks over the years apply for them. It's most often folks who are seniors or who have healthcare concerns. Obviously, right now in this healthcare crisis, we all have concerns, and it's tough to know where we'll be in June for the primary. So kudos to the governor for signing that executive order. And one other. Going back to the local organizations, one of the groups of folks in the community that has recognized how we can help workers at Phelps is to bring them meals. And so there's an opportunity to contribute via GoFundMe to a meal train that takes money from donations from folks in the community and uses those donations to buy meals from local restaurants and bring them to the workers at the hospital. And we've heard that it's been very much appreciated by all of the hospital workers, the aides, the staff, the nurses, and of course the doctors. And we're really pleased to be able to support any of those organizations we were talking about before. And I know we have such a tremendously generous community, and I know that people have been generous and will continue to be generous and also creative and thoughtful at organizing. So kudos to everyone who gives money, and kudos to everyone who helps us understand or present the opportunities where we can donate. So I just wanted to give folks the update. The local number for today for positive cases is 321. Yesterday we were at 300. Today we're at 321. There is some good news on the horizon this week anyway, that the number of folks entering the hospital was lower than the number of folks being released from hospitals. That's a good number, and we'll look to see some trends and patterns developing and see what that means in the larger picture. Earlier today I spoke with someone from New Zealand who was telling me that his family lives in New Zealand, that in that country where they took proactive measures right away and shut down and had a lot of restrictions right away, that in 4 weeks they were able to open back up, which seems like that's a new record. So I'm interested to see how that works. And then we also heard that in Wuhan things are finally opening up, and it's been 11 weeks since it hit them. So I imagine it sounds like maybe we'll be somewhere between 4 weeks and 11 weeks for these restrictions, and we are now on week 4. So we'll see where we go. Welcome to, I see a few more folks have joined us. Good to see you, Felix. Greg, Felix, you've been on for a little while. Serafina just joined us. Hi, Greg. You've been on with us before. I wanted to talk about a couple of different things today than what we had spoken about. With the, we haven't talked much about unemployment. There are lots and lots and lots of people who are applying for unemployment. And part of New York State has responded by expanding their hours because it's been so difficult to get through online or by phone. And some folks are required to call in and can't just do it online, depending on what your claim is and how long it's been since you've claimed or what other information they might need. So you can get, depending on when your unemployment date began, your claim can be backdated. So maybe you haven't been working since last week and you haven't been able to get through. You might be able to just specify what the date is. And they have split it up to try and get folks to call in on different days. Anybody at the beginning of the alphabet, A through F, is on Monday. And only if your last name is in that part of the alphabet should you call on Monday. Tuesday, G through N. Wednesday, O through Z. And then the rest of the week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, any letter of the alphabet can give a call. And the hours are oddly similar, but not quite the same. Monday to Friday is 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday is 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., and obviously you should go online to the New York Department of Labor on their unemployment website. I have a question here. Why are such high numbers in the village versus the town? Well, I mean, the village's population is, well, technically based on the census numbers, about 26,000. I think it's probably closer to 30,000 10 years later, and with a more accurate count. And the town's numbers are more about 5 or 6,000. So our population is, what's that, at least 4 to 5 times the size of the unincorporated town. So that would be part of it. And part of it is who's getting tested. Most of the positive cases that we have are people who have been tested through the open door, so they are open door patients. Open door patients tend to live in the village and not in the town, so that's certainly a contributing factor. The numbers give us, the numbers not just in Ossining, but in the county and the state, give us a trend. They give us something to point to, something to understand, hopefully, what we can apply more broadly. But specifically, where there's more testing, there's more positive cases. Our rate of positivity is consistent with the county and the state, which is around 40% now, meaning that of the people who come in and get tested, and those are people who are symptomatic and have some reason to believe that they may be positive. So if you're feeling perfectly healthy and haven't been exposed to anybody who has tested positive, then you're not going to get tested. But if you're having symptoms and if you've been exposed to anybody, then you get tested and you're likely to, you have about a 40% chance based on the results that they've been getting at the open door of being positive. That's what we found. That I believe that was the latest number. It was 37% last week, and so the numbers are getting a little bit higher. And I'm not an epidemiologist to be able to explain that specifically, but that would be part of the explanation of the village versus any other community. And the last Wednesday, our village board meeting began with a visit from Lindsay Farrell from Open Door, and that's available on the village's YouTube channel if you'd like to get a lot more insight from the healthcare professional who leads our local organization. I would definitely recommend that. That's part of what she talked about, was how the Ossining Open Door was at the forefront of being a testing site for the virus, and that is a big contributing factor to our numbers, our positive numbers. Getting back to some of the financial challenges that we have, I'll just give people a little context of where we are in village government. One of the things we talked about at our village board meeting last night, we met on Tuesday, which is unusual for us. Our meetings are typically Wednesday, but of course tonight is Passover. So we met last night virtually by Zoom, and we talked about our village budget, where we are now, where we have some budget items that maybe we want to hold back on. And we began the conversation, and we will continue it next week, and I imagine we will continue it beyond that. Typically, our budget cycle, the village manager sits down in September and October with her department heads and plans what they're going to propose in the budget. And then the village board spends November meeting with all of the department heads and evaluating what their requests are. And in the end of that, then we come up with what is going to be the adopted budget. We vote on that in the first week in December. And that's really where our intense focus is, usually for the budget. Obviously, this is not a usual year, so we're getting a very early start on thinking about what it's going to look like for next year. Obviously, there's so many unknowns, so many speculations and projections, but it was reassuring to know that that our finance department is already in meetings with their counterparts in other municipalities and with the county, and getting some feedback from the county on what their projected revenues are for things like sales tax revenue, what we're anticipating for things like mortgage tax revenue. Our property tax revenue is about 60% of the village revenue, and property tax revenue is something we'll just have to see what that looks like. Obviously, the tax bills for 2020, your 2020 property tax bills, were set last December based on your property values from the previous year, from 2019, because that's always a year lag, obviously. The property values in Ossining are 100% valuation, so when the market changes, your assessed value changes. And when your assessed value changes, that changes your property tax bill. So, for example, in the village of Ossining, we've had a 0% tax rate increase for 4 years. What that means is if your house has a value of $400,000 3 years ago, and it has a value of $400,000 this year, then your village property tax bill would be the same. That pretty much never happens. People's property value usually goes up a little bit, although last year we did see one neighborhood go down a little bit. For that neighborhood where the property value went down a little bit, then their village tax bill went down a little bit. For most folks, they saw a little bit of an increase. Some neighborhoods saw their property tax assessed value, their property assessed value was held steady, in which case their village tax bill was the same because we had a 0% tax rate increase. So what we may see coming up is that property values, the assessed values may drop. If people are not able to buy houses at the same level that they had been. We saw a big drop in 2008, 2009. That had major implications on our economy, obviously. So we'll see what happens with that. Meanwhile, we have had, despite the fact that we've been able to maintain a 0% tax rate increase in the village for the last few years, we have been able to also build a healthy fund balance. And that is because the village board has conservative budgeting for years. So we have a healthy fund balance. And it's actually because of that healthy fund balance that I have felt that we cannot raise taxes because we shouldn't just continue to build that fund beyond what is an appropriate amount. And we do need to have a healthy fund so that we can draw on that in occasions like what we're experiencing now without having to raise the tax rate by any more than absolutely necessary. We know that people are going to be in financial straits. So what I started telling you about was the village board last night spent some time talking with our staff, with our finance staff, and identifying what are our priorities. What are the things that we think we need to be spending money on this year when we know we're going to be tightening our belts in other places. Maybe we're not going to be buying some of the vehicles that we felt we should be buying now. And that's always a tricky balance. We need to have trucks that function well. If they stop functioning well, then we end up spending money on repairs or not being able to keep up with maintenance. So it's a tricky balance, but we're going to be making some tough decisions. And the best way to make informed decisions is to start having those conversations early and often, which is what we are doing. For small businesses that are, hello, Jose, good to see you. For small businesses that are looking for loan assistance, there are a number of programs out there that are provided at the federal government level. And so I'm just going to give you a website for the disaster loan assistance opportunity. There's a couple of programs out there, and sometimes it's unclear what you can apply for, or people think they've applied for something in the CARES Act, and they have, but there might be there's another opportunity. So check out COVID-19 relief.sba.gov/#. So that's COVID-19 relief.sba.gov, and find out about the disaster loan assistance, which is actually a much more streamlined application that is supposed to get the money out to folks, local small businesses under 500 people, more quickly than some of the SBA loan programs. And also they have different requirements of what will actually essentially be a grant and what will need to be paid back with a low interest loan. And the last thing that I have on my agenda that I want to bring up is your census reminder. I will remind folks about the census whenever possible and try to provide you with a little bit more information. Our response rate in the village, last I looked, which was yesterday, is not great. We have historically had a low response rate to the census, and what that means is we're not getting our fair share of funding. We're not being adequately and appropriately represented at the county, state, and federal level, and we're not getting as much funding as is due to us. So please, reach out to anyone and everyone you know in every way that you can who lives in Ossining and say, please respond. It's so quick and easy to do it online. You can do it online in a variety of languages. You can do it by phone in a variety of languages. If you received in the mail your census ID number, that's the number that you use. If you don't have your census ID number, you can still apply. So I wanted to take this opportunity to give folks a couple of examples of that I'm familiar with in local government of how we make use of those census numbers. And we're stuck with them for 10 years. And our census 2010 numbers were 25,600, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. It's something along those lines. And we know that we were undercounted. It is typical that wealthier communities are more accurately counted than less wealthy communities. And what does that mean? That means that wealthier communities are accurately represented in their government, in higher levels of government, and they are receiving the full funding due to them. So let me tell you about sales tax revenue. It's something we talked more about, and I learned more about, all of us did, when the county decided that they wanted to raise the sales tax throughout most of Westchester. And when that happened, we realized, wow, it was finally clear to us, and it was crazy. I could never get accurate answers from folks, but because we had to, there was this big decision being made about how they might change the taxing percentage for sales tax in Westchester, we really got to understand what that means. And what it means is every single business, commercial property, everything in Ossining could shut down tomorrow, and we would get the exact same sales tax revenue as if 20 more stores opened up tomorrow. Because the sales tax revenue that comes to us in the village and a town and any of the small cities which participate in the county sales tax sharing procedure, which is what we do. That's how we get our sales tax revenue, which is part of the revenue that we need to be able to do the village business that doesn't have to come from property taxes. So it's really important. The sales tax revenue is based on your census data. So the sales tax revenue we are getting right now in the year 2020 in the village of Ossining is based on the incomplete, inaccurate, substandard count that we had in 2010. That means we could have been every year for the last decade getting more sales tax revenue than we are. You know who's getting a lot more? Other communities that have more money already, that have less of a need for the sales tax revenue to come to their community, and that did a better job at getting people to respond to the census. That's why it is that's one of the many, many reasons it is so critically important to get an accurate count in the census. And other things that come through census numbers are a lot of grant money. Grant money that matters to us, grant money that we use to apply for improvements to our parks. So if you and your family participate in any team sports that benefit from well-maintained village parks, then this matters to you. Maybe reach out to the members of your team, to your teammates' parents, and say, have you responded to the census? It's super easy. You can do it in any language. A CDBG funding, which is Community Development Block Grants, which pays for a lot of times when we do things downtown, when we get new sidewalks, we can get new paving, we get new infrastructure that's for the general community benefit, that can be offset tremendously by CDBG funding, Community Development Block Grants, that is based on census tract numbers. So it's critically important that we have an accurate census count. It means we have access to a lot more funding, which alleviates the burdens of what we have to draw from property taxes. And please know there is no question about your citizenship. They do not need to know that. They do not ask it. They ask race. They ask what you consider your nationality to be, but it doesn't matter where your passport is from. It doesn't matter if you have documents, if you've been here your entire life for generations or for weeks. If you lived here in the village of Ossining on April 1st, please make sure that you and your household have responded to the census. It's critically important. And so let's bring it back to something a little more cheerful. A few folks have joined us since the beginning. We started off saying Happy Passover to all who celebrate. And Passover and Easter are both happening this week. It's always nice when those holidays coincide. We thought we'd be enjoying spring break, those of us who follow a school schedule in our lives. I have to say my son was really, really unhappy on Monday when he found out he still had to do schoolwork this week. But one of the most heartwarming things that we have seen happen during this very, very difficult time is the organizations and the individuals who have stepped up to try and alleviate some of the burden in our community, to try and make things a little bit better, and to support the organizations that are doing great work, keeping us safe and keeping people fed in our community. And so I'm going to, after we sign off here in a couple of moments, I'm going to add a couple of links for organizations that folks can contribute to, and many of you already have. If there is an organization that you want to encourage people to contribute to, then please feel free to add that to the thread as well. I will be coming back to you tomorrow for 10 or 20 minutes, depending on what the topic of the day is. And I look forward to seeing folks tomorrow. If you have any questions you want me to look into before I come on air tomorrow, then please email me at Gearity@villageofossining.org. Meanwhile, happy Passover. I look forward to seeing folks tomorrow. Be safe.